I guess we are live now. Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I would like to welcome you, sir, from Parallel University and its students. First of all, I would like to brief you about our esteemed guest today. He is Assistant Commandant Chinmay Shekhar. He is presently serving in Central Reserve Police Force, which sometimes is dubbed as the Army for Crisis Situations by many because of its combat roles. Examples of which we must have seen in JNK. Examples of which we must have seen in J&K. So, bit about Chinmay sir. Since from his childhood, he was a avid reader and writer and have wrote many science fiction articles, many of which have got published in many of the esteemed journals and magazines. Hence, no surprise that he went on to clear Central Armed Police Force examination of UPSC in his very first attempt. He's also immensely passionate about the latest gadgets, which one would surely observe if they would visit his home if they get the chance. He's a great fitness enthusiast and never misses his exercise except when he's taking down Maoists in Jharkhand or terrorists in J&K. Chinmay sir, we would like to welcome you and we would like to brief you a bit about one of its kind initiative which we have done here in competitive examination cell. This cell has been envisaged by our Honorable President, Dr. Devanshu Patel, who wanted that Parallel University students can prepare for competitive exams, various competitive exams, like all the UPSC exams, UPSC Civil Services exam, CAPF exam, RBI, and many more, along with their graduation. Our cell is a non-profit initiative through which we ensures that our students need not waste their precious years after graduation by dropping out just for the preparation sake of any examination and so-called any of the examinations in so-called coaching hubs in some alien city by paying tens of lakhs of rupees for just the coaching sake. So, sir, with your permission, we now formally start with a brief from your side about these services, which will be a guidance for our students. Sir, over to you.
Thank you, Devender, for your wonderful introduction. And that was a bit too much, but anyway, thank you so much. Thank you again for Parallel University, and I welcome all the students for a small presentation, a small talk that I'm going to give you, and I hope you all benefit from this. So basically, I will start with a small presentation that will explain about Central Armed Police Forces and certain other aspects regarding with the same. And then you can ask me any questionnaire or whatever it is after the presentation. Are we clear?
Yes, sir.
Shall I start my presentation now?
Yes, sir, sure.
All right. So yeah, here is the opening slide. If you all can view it in your this thing, I'm sure it's coming. So yeah. Decoding you. It is something that I just put in my first slide, saying that you're being told what you want to be. Okay, so why I put this as my first slide is because you need to understand what you are before, right? So the expectations of society and what you must achieve in your life. So that is what I was trying to put it here. The expectation of society versus what you want to be. So I think that must be very clear for you before giving any kind of competitive exam or before going further in your life, especially after finishing your graduation. So next, life is passion. Follow your dreams because you live your life only once. I think we all know that it's just once that we get our chance to live our dreams. So most of the time it so happens that, when we are in the school, we dream about becoming pilot, we dream of getting to the army, we do that, we do this, a doctor or an engineer. But later on, somehow that passion dies down. And we try to forget it. But what I'm saying is it's important that you stick to your dreams. Even whatever graduation you're doing, your dreams should still remain the same and intact. No matter what the age, no matter what, you must follow your passion. That is what I meant by this. And now I'll come to the specifics. So since you all are university students, you have this career in front of you after you graduate. One is either you join a private sector. I'm not going into much into the private sector because I think you all know it. And next is the government sector. Government sector, the various officers that you get into, there are UPSC exams, SSC exams, RBI and bank exams, or you can do your higher studies. That's what this slide would mean. So now we'll completely concentrate on UPSC since the competitive cell deals with that. So here is an overview that I've given regarding all the Union Public Service Commission exams, IAS, IFS, IES. IAS is basically the civil service examination. And if you come below, there is something called as the CAPF. So that is what I have cleared way back in 2013. The exam that I wrote was in 2013. That was the CAPF exam. And then there is the CDA, which I had also cleared. And then the NDA and NA, that is +2. I think you all are now in the graduation phase, so NDA is not possible. All the other things above that is possible. So, I've just pulled in the various examinations that are conducted by UPSC. And now we'll deal something that is very specific to the CAPF exam. Okay, so the CAPF exam consists of the things that I've written here. One is the paper 1 and paper 2. And paper 1 consists of the objective, that is for 125 marks, and that includes all your skills of mental ability and along with general studies. General studies includes the same thing, the geography, history, economics, civil society regarding, and the current affairs also. So that is what the paper 1 is all about. Paper 1 is objective in nature and paper 2 is subjective in nature. Paper 2, you have to write an essay regarding the topics that I have given, and a pre writing is also there. So basically it is about the testing of your overall knowledge and about the analysis, how you analyze things in an essay, the exact relation of how things are. So that is the paper 1 and paper 2. And that entire paper 1 and paper 2 is done in one day. So initially the first part is paper 1 and the second part paper 2. And next, once you clear through the paper 1 and paper 2, you have the physical test. So the physical test includes 800 meters, shot put, 100 meters, and long jump. So I personally feel that you don't have to work extra hard for the physical test, because if you're doing some minimum physical activity, or if you have been doing since your school days or childhood, I think that should be fine. Since I was playing football all throughout my life during the school days, during university days, so I felt that it is fair enough, 800 meters, and there's a good amount of time that you can clear through it, especially for the officer cadre. So I think it shouldn't be a problem. Once you get through paper 1 and paper 2, then the physical test shouldn't be a problem until and unless you keep yourself fit. And next you have the medical test. So I just want to tell you that the difference between the civil service examination and CAPF examination is here, because in civil service examination, you have the medical test after the interview. Here it happens before the interview. So you're physically tested first, and then you're medically fit. Once all those conditions are there, then you're selected for the final interview. So medical test consists of 3 days. So it is like the overall general checkup of your body. I think it must be fine, and there is nothing much you can do about it, because it's all about the doctor. It is your health. Just maintain your hygiene and your physical fitness. I think that should keep track of your medical. That should clear your medicals well and fine. And most of the people, the only problem that they will not clear the medicals would be their weight. And nowadays, the doctor is giving almost around 1 month of relaxation for your this thing for a next medical test. Rather than failing you in the first one, they say that I am giving you 15 to 30 days, and you can go for a review medical test. What is called as a review medical test after you reduce the weight. So paper 1 and 2 is clear, physical test is clear, and medical test is clear. Now we come to the interview stage. The last and final is the interview stage, where it is 1:3. If the vacancy is, let's say, around 100, so the number of people called for interviews around 300. So that is the usual ratio that they call you for, 1:3 ratio. And interview, I feel, is the most important aspect, because interview decides your overall ranking, your overall merit list. Interview decides where you stand in the merit, and that decides again your service that you get into, the choice of service and the part of it. And it is exactly same as the civil services. The board is the same, the pattern is same, the type of questioning is the same, everything is the same. And mostly they concentrate something related to security aspect, because since you're coming into the field of security forces, you must be able to have that aptitude for security. If I'm saying, that nature of how you tackle things is important. So they try to test you that. They try to test you that nature in you, where you will be able to be in that particular situation and tackle it. Because there are innumerable situations that you'll be facing since you're dealing with life and death situation here, it is very important that they test you in every matter and every aspect of it. And my personal viewpoint for you all is try to be honest, try to be open. Even there are a million things we cannot know. Everybody cannot know everything. So whatever you don't know, just say you don't know rather than giving a bluff, because all of them are well qualified interviewers. So they will be very keenly observing you. And my board was Klim Shungla ma'am. So the most of the aspects that she asked was relating to analysis, relating to what I think, what I feel about. And during that time, it was Nirbhaya case had happened, and a lot of questions revolved around the safety of women and how women have to come to forces and how much is it possible. Although 33% reservation is there, I feel that there is still very, very less amount of women in the forces. So some of the questions revolved around that, and some other questions revolved around my hometown. My hometown is Mysore, and my home state, the things I know about it, geographical indication tags, and certain archaeological aspects related to that, and all those things. And it is very important for you to make sure that you know the mandates of each forces. Mandates of each forces, I'll come later on. So you must all know which exam, what you're getting into. What you're getting into is what is important for you. And the last question that I was asked was, what was the full form of CRPF before the independence? So CRPF, as I said, was started, like I am going to say, it started in 1939. Back then, I did not know. So what I said to them directly was, sir, I'm sorry, I do not know, but maybe when I get into the forces, I'll get to know. So it is better to be honest rather than to give a bluff. So the thing was, they asked me the full form of CRPF. Earlier, before the independence, it was called as the CRP, which is the Crown Representative Police. So basically what the British government wanted was a union policing force, a central policing force, which can tackle any kind of emergency situation, any kind of internal security situation during that time. So 1939, Britishers made this called as the Crown Representative Police, which later on, when Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, our Home Minister, the then Home Minister came, he recoined it as the Central Reserve Police Force. Okay, so they thought that this would not be needed, and it might be a legacy of the colonial era. But over time, we realized that CRPF has played a very important role in all aspects compared to internal security, be it in elections, be it in related to Naxalism, be it insurgency, be it terrorism, be it related to any kind of VIP security, any kind of thing. CRPF is involved in, CRPF's forces are involved in all types of security related to internal issues. So this is regarding the exam of paper 1, paper 2, physical test, medical interview. I hope I'm clear with this pattern of examination of CRPF. Now, in CRPF, this is what I have given you, the choice of forces, right? The ones that are in the left side deal with the parent organization. That is the CRPF, CASF, BASF, ITBP, and SSB. So the ones in the left are the parent organization which you get inducted to. So you get trained in a particular academy here, and then you get inducted to these forces. And then the ones that I've written in the right side, the deputations. So these, all of these come under Ministry of Home Affairs. I must make sure that I tell you that. All of these come under Ministry of Home Affairs, and you can be deputed to any of the departments or organizations that come under the Ministry of Home Affairs. Like, for example, the NIA is exactly dealing with all the cases related to terrorism. So, for example, the Pulwama incident that happened, or the Uri incident. So all the cases are inquired by NIA. So you can get into NIA as an officer in the rank of Superintendent of Police, SP or ASP, like that. And then next is the CBI. CBI deals with all the inquiries related to graft and corruptions. You can get into CBI. And then it is the IB and DRAW, Intelligence Bureau and RAW. IB relates to all the intelligence within the country. And RAW relates to all the intelligence that relates to external intelligence away from the country. You're placed as an agent in one of the countries. You're dealing with a lot of sources, and then there is a big network, big web kind of network with IB and RAW. I mean, you can get into these posts later on. That's what I'm saying. Once you clear this training of CRPF, ISF, BSF, ITBP, whatever choice that you get in CRPF exam, later on, every of them have their own criteria, have their own psychological tests, have their own written tests, and there are certain criteria that come after service once you join the service. And next there is BPR&D. BPR&D is Bureau of Police Research and Development, where you get into certain aspects related to study work, the aspects that related to all the filing and stuff. And then there is NDRF. NDRF is National Disaster Response Force. I'm sure you all have heard of NDRF, because whatever the cyclone is, NDRF is in place. Whatever there is an avalanche, NDRF is in place. Most of the times during the flood times, NDRF is in place. And next is the UN mission. You can also go as an UN mission as a part of India's peacekeeping force. There is something called as UNPKF, UN, United Nations Peacekeeping Force, where you go to Somalia, Liberia, you go to Afghanistan, and all those other parts where UN is involved in peacekeeping. And you get a very lot of good exposure, good combat exposure, because you deal with other forces. You have forces from NATO, you have forces from your other European forces are there, US forces are there. So all these forces combinedly pull in for the UN. So when you go for UN missions, you have a lot of experience, and then you have various category of financial benefits in that. And I have forgotten to mention other deputations, which include SPG. SPG is the Special Protection Group, where I'm sure you have all seen, the inner cordon circle of the Prime Minister or the President that they do. So you can opt for SPG also, the Special Protection Group, and also the NSG. NSG, or the Black Cats, that is the exclusively special task force for any counter-terrorism activities. Okay, so for example, you must have heard of the Black Cats NSG way back in your Mumbai attack, 2009-11 attack which happened. So that is when the SPG was fully blown into force, and the SPG is like the NSG is like a standby force for any kind of acts of terrorism on the motherland of India. I think I'm clear about this choice of forces. The left side is the parent units where you get trained, and the right side is the deputations where you can go as an officer. So next, we'll come to what is called as the theaters of conflict. So CRPF is again dealing everything that is related to the internal security. The mandate of CRPF is the peacekeeper of the nation. So whatever the internal security matters of India, the first thing that comes to mind is the CRPF, because in the constitution, overall in the constitution, if you look at law and order comes under what is called as the concurrent list. So you have the state list, you have the center list, and then there is a concurrent list. So in the Constitution of India, you have the security, law and order as the concurrent list. So it basically comes into the state. The basically of law and order comes in the state, and if the state is unable to control a situation, then the CRPF come into force. I hope I'm clarifying certain things about it. When the state is not able to control law and order situation, CRPF comes into force. Or if the center feels that the state is not able to control whatever the situation is, then CRPF is put into place. Nowadays, it has so become that the reserve part of the CRPF has become vague. We have basically been a major part in the managing of internal security. We are deployed everywhere almost. It is no more a reserve police force as such. So that is why in the year 2011, they made an amendment act saying the CAPF Amendment Act of 2011. That is when CAPF, the word CAPF, Central Armed Police Forces, came into being. Okay, because there was a separate act for it. Separate act, that term, that's all these services are, legitimate, and they are exclusively for certain purpose. And CRPF deals exclusively with internal security. So whenever the law and order, the state police is not able to handle, CRPF is in place. For example, let me give you an example of, there is a disturbance between two states regarding sharing of water. For example, Karnataka and Tamil Nadu, there is sharing of Kaveri River. I'm sure you must have all come across that. So whenever there is a problem, then CRPF is deployed, and they go there, they handle the crowd, they take care of it, and the law and order situation is in the hand of CRPF if the state police is not able to control it. The reason being that we are better equipped, we are better skilled, and we are better trained to handle law and order situations and any other internal aspects of internal security aspects. Now coming to the main theaters, one is the Kashmir that I have written, Kashmir War and Paradise. Way back from 1990s, Kashmir has been, what you can say, it's a dilemma kind of thing in India. It rises and falls, it rises and falls. And from 2016, after the killing of Burhan Wani, though the situation in Kashmir has tremendously increased, become very tense. The situation has become very, very tense in Kashmir. And after the abortion of Article 370, I think that Kashmir has been in control to a certain extent. There is the stone pelting has stopped. I was in Kashmir in 2017 and 18, so I know how the situation is over there. It is very, very intense. There are grenade attacks. There are a lot of firing, and every time you must be coming across the news a lot of incidents about Kashmir. So right now there is still a long way to go. Even after the abortion of 370, the terrorists are there. We are killing them. We are trying to counter them. And one of the special task force is the RR. You know, the Rashtriya Rifles that comes with the army. So I was a part of RR way back in 2011. So that is the exclusive counter-terrorism unit, Rashtriya Rifles, that handles terrorism in Kashmir. And along with that, CRPF is deployed for various other law and order issues like tackling stone pelting or tackling any other law and order situation related to the state. So that is related to Kashmir. It is a whole big topic if I keep saying about Kashmir. So I'm just giving you an overall idea of where the CRPF is placed, main theaters where the CRPF is managing. So one is the Kashmir, and next we come to the insurgency. Insurgency in Northeast. Insurgency is the biggest business in the Northeast. So it was already a big thing way back in. It started from 80s, 90s. You know, it is there since the independence. The Nagas, the Kukis, and all the tribal people in the Northeast revolted because they felt neglected. Northeast was completely cut off from the mainland India. Even if you see now, it is already you feel that it is not as developed as the other main parts of India is concerned. I was there in Manipur in 2016. So the problem with Northeast is that it is not so intense as of now because all the government of India has all the agreements. You know, with Naga Council, they have an agreement with Kuki Council, have an agreement with Kamlang insurgents. So the thing there is like it is quite peaceful, but you know there are certain spurts of incidents. You know, they just show their presence. They show their presence. They throw a grenade into the market. They just blast it, saying that okay, we are still present there. They just do not want the government to sleep. Although there are agreements, there is not any major conflict as such. There are certain issues, and recently the Assam issue where the NHRC was there. National Human Registration, you know, regarding that, a lot of forces were deployed, a lot of this were deployed, and the insurgents were active for quite some time. But then again, they agreed that finally, you know, you have something that is there, that is they have a legitimate for the state. All the illegally people who had come from Bangladesh or from Myanmar or so, they can be sent back. Although there are many flaws, I feel that you know it is a stand. Okay, it is a stand that they're doing something just to make sure that only the legal people stay there and legal people get the jobs. So a lot of our forces was deployed during that, and there were a lot of insurgent activities. I think it has died down quite a bit from the last year or the last year before that. So that deals with all the Northeast insurgency. We are dealing with all kinds of insurgency in the Northeast. And now below that, you can see what I have pictured is the Red Corridor, or you can say the Naxalism that is happening in India. CRPS is the exclusively task force that deals with Naxalism. So Naxalism is basically a guerrilla warfare. You know, I am posted in a Naxal area, Naxal affected area right now. In fact, I'm talking to all of you through satellite communication, where I'm in a camp where the Naxals had their camp way back in 2014. Around 400 of them used to stay in this area. They used to train, and then CRPF slowly pushed them in the area. There was no road. Now we have constructed a road. There is proper communication between other sectors and other agencies. So there were numerous incidents from 2014 to 2018 in this area where right now I'm in Jharkhand. So a lot of IEDs, you know, improvised explosive devices. And the main problem with guerrilla warfare is your enemy is not in front of you. In Kashmir, they're in front of you. You're countering them. You're encountering them. You know that they're throwing grenade. You're wearing bulletproof jacket. But here the problem is the enemy is hidden. You know, the enemy is hidden in the jungle. The enemy is a common man. The enemy is just a random villager. He's villager by the day and an Naxal by the night. That is what you must have all read or studied related to Naxalism. So when we go out on operations, we go for 3-4 days into the jungles. We try to track the Naxals down, and CRPF has been very largely successful in taking down the Naxals, especially in the area of Jharkhand and even in Chhattisgarh. Right now, Chhattisgarh is the #1 state where Naxal incidents happen. You know, and the second is Jharkhand. Jharkhand, we have pretty much reduced. We have negated a lot of cadre, a lot of their cadres, especially their commanders. You know, the area commanders that they have. So we have neutralized most of them. There are a few still remaining, and the government is doing we're quite good trying to neutralize them. So this is what we do. I am right now present in that last theater that I said, and I am posted to Kashmir next year. You know, by this year end, most likely I'll be going back to Kashmir where I was way back 3 years before. So that's what I was telling about Naxal. So all this red corridor, the Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, and some parts of Bengal and Orissa and Andhra Pradesh. So all these things is handled by the CRPF. All the Naxal, anti-Naxal operations is handled by the CRPF. I think I'm clear with all the theaters of conflict that is there. Next, we will move on to something called as the various other organizations, various other levels of this thing in CRPF. So there are two specifications in CRPF. One is the Rapid Action Police Force, and the other is the Cobra. So RAF, I am sure that you have seen this uniform with blue color. You know, I'll show you the same thing. This is the one that I'm talking about. In CRPF, we have two specializations. You know, the one is the RAF, that is the Rapid Action Force, and one is the Cobra, that is exclusively counter. That is a special force for counter Naxalism. So let's talk about RAF here. RAF specifically deals with law and order situations. So I'm sure that even in your cities, even in Gujarat, in Ahmedabad, there is 101 RAF that deals with all the aspects related to law and order. You know, when there are riots, when there are people who are gathering, when there is certain incidents where the state police cannot control, the Rapid Action Force comes into play and they disperse the crowd. So it is exclusively for crowd control. That is what I mean to say, RAF. Now we come here to what is called as the Cobra. Cobra, the abbreviation is the Combat Battalion for Resolute Action. So Cobra was raised way back in 2007, and it is a battalion, it is a special unit. You know, just like RR that I said about Kashmir, Cobra battalions are raised exclusively for counter Naxalism. You know, for countering the Naxalism, they penetrate deep into the jungles. They go for operations almost up to 15 days, 1 month at a stretch, without any this thing. They put some base camp, and then we move ahead. We have points here, checkpoints called as LUPs, and then we keep moving ahead, and then we penetrate in deep into the targets, deep into the jungles where their hideouts are, the Naxal hideouts are. So I have given in front of you a certain images of some of my batchmates here who are there in Cobra. The top right corner you can see, that is Assistant Commandant Usha Kiran. She was the first female officer from the CRPF, first female officer in India to join the Cobra. She was my batchmate, and she's doing extremely well in Dantewada. She's posted in Chhattisgarh. I'm sure you must have come across her in a lot of news, because there's a lot of media coverage when she became the first female officer to join the Cobra. And then right, you can see one of my batchmates wearing a complete getup of VHF set of his, that is an M95 weapon that he has in his hand, and the complete gear that they take when they move into the jungles. Also, there is a backpack that they do not have. So, I mean, they're not shown in this particular picture. So they have a backpack of around 15 to 20 kgs, which we all take when we go out for anti-Naxal operations in jungles. And below that is, what you can see is the picture of the Belgian Milanese. So CRPF is training a particular breed called as the Belgian Milanese exclusively for all the operations that deal with anti-Naxalism and anti-terrorism. So dogs have been a very important aspect of our life now, you know, because dogs can save, dogs can smell and track the bombs, they can smell and track IDs, and they can sense if there is any ambush that is placed in front of you. If you are moving in a team, they can sense if there is any person that is there, and they can alert the team beforehand. So that is what I have tried to portray. The Cobra units that we have, there are 10 Cobra units as a specialized part of CRPF for anti-Naxal operations. So that is it, and we'll just try to wind up soon so that you can give your questions more. For those I love, I will sacrifice. Yeah, though I walk the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. I will just put in some quotes for you since you're all young. It is important for you to be motivated to come into the forces. It is adventurous, it is thrilling. You have everything right now. You have a lot of financial benefits, and you get all the administrative benefits, you know. So way back in 90s and 2000s, a lot of forces were suffering because of lack of funding. But now there is a lot of funding from the government of India for your weaponization, for modernization of your weapons. and for the financial benefits of the forces. You have all kinds of benefits related to risk allowance, ration money, and you have medical emergency allowances, medical emergency facilities. You have your unit hospitals. So the government is pretty much taking care of your needs. You have education CAs, child education allowance, and you have schools. You have peace locations and ADAM locations. Once you work in field locations, there is a likelihood that you'll be posted in peace locations. So in peace locations, you have water, you have good amount of quarters, you have all those nice facilities that you would want to enjoy when you are in peace. So yes, this is what an overall, an idea of how the life is in the forces, the life is in the CRPF. And finally, this is my last presentation, last slide in my PPT. So I'll give you 15 seconds to read what it is. I'll give you some time so that you read that and you analyze what I have written. So one of my favorite quotes written by Charles is this. So it says that once if you want to do something, once you are going to start doing something, it's just not, you shouldn't back away. Once you have kept up your mind to give an UPSC exam, it's going to take time. You will be failing in a lot of times. But eventually, what is important that you will succeed someday. I have a lot of friends who have failed twice, thrice, fourth, fifth time. One of my friends just cleared Indian Foreign Service. He cleared the civil service and he got Indian Foreign Service. So what I'm trying to say is, irrespective of all the odds, you must go for it. You will be having a lot of people who will be saying that, why do you want to go there? Why do you want to go there? It is very tough. Now it is an easy life, that life, this life. So you'll have a lot of forces that go against your will. But if you really want to go for it, if you really want to try and give it your best shot, you must all go for it. I feel that this is a wonderful organization. Everything is an amazing setup. If you want your life to be adventurous and thrilling, rather than not just sitting in front of the computer, I think you have to go for it. And here it is open for everyone. Not just if you're doing your arts or commerce or your engineering. It is open for everyone. Even in engineering, I myself am an engineer, an electronics and communication engineer. So we have a lot of communication setup. We have separate communication sector that is there. We'll recruit you in those sectors. And for other people who have done their BA also, you can always get into CRPF. You can always get into CAPF forces. And what I'm saying now is that there is a lot of competition for government services, compared to the other times. There's a lot of competition for government services, especially after this Corona period, because the private sector is slowly, gradually shrinking down. When there are 10 people doing the work, now they've cut it down to 5 people. The 5 people are able to do the work. But the government sector will never die down. You can never negate the police forces. You can never negate the government hospital staff. You can never negate the ministries that are working. So this is a field where things are more challenging. You're dealing with a lot of things. You're dealing with all sorts of people. You're dealing with administration. You're dealing with procurement. You're dealing with technical aspects. You're dealing with men, and most importantly, you're putting your life in the edge. You're putting your life on the edge where you have that feel that you cannot have. When I was in Kashmir, we used to trek for around 8-10 hours up to almost like 12,000 feet, that only normal people can think of when they're going for hikes or something like that. But here it becomes a routine. Adventure becomes a routine. You're camping, and then there is a sunrise. You have this beautiful view of the valley. You have this beautiful view of the jungle in front of you. You have a river flowing through. See, all those things you can experience it. But you must love your job. If you don't love your job, this becomes a very tough time. But you love your job. You're good with what you do. I welcome all of you. You must prepare hard for it. You must strive to get through it. And I hope that you all clear make sure that all your dreams come true, or whatever you are wanting to achieve. So yes, this is my small presentation that I had. And thank you all. Jai Hind. If there are any questions, do let me know. Over to you, Devendra.
Thank you, Chinmay sir, for this impeccable introduction of your organization. I'll be very candid to you that this is the first time I have came across such an introduction of an organization by an officer who is personally working into it. So thank you for this wonderful introduction for our students. I presume they all will be aspired and motivated enough to join these services later on into their lives. Now they have bombarded me with all the kind of questions after your presentation. So firstly, we will take up the related questions. The first question, I guess they all are very much fascinated about the action-packed movies of the Hollywood and Bollywood, like Ekta Tiger and James Bond. That's why they're asking too many questions about how being into CRPF and CAPF, they can go into RAW and IB and NSG. So what are there any separate parameters to go into those forces, or it's on rotation basis? And what benefits they especially get into by being into those forces?
Okay, so I think, as I said in one of my presentation, I give you an idea of what the parent organizations are: CRPF, CISF, ITBP, and all. So once you clear CRPF exam, you will get into all these organizations. So any one of these organizations. Next, I came to what is called as the deputation. So all the deputations have their own criteria. For NIA, you need to have 3 years of service. You need to have a good knowledge about computers. You need to have a good knowledge about how things work in the national scenario, and they have their own tests. So, for example, let me give you an example. Like now, I have to get into NIA. So what I will do right now is they have a set of qualifications. So my 3 years of service is complete. I'll make a check mark for that. Next check mark, and then there is an interview. They have something called as a personal interview. Once there are vacancies, they will circulate you all those vacancies, so you can apply for that interview in Delhi. So once you go for the interview in NIA, once you get through the NIA, then you get a letter saying that finally you will be deputed to NIA. So from CRPF, you're going on deputation to NIA for 4 years. So you will be going to NIA for 4 years, and after 4 years, you'll be repatriated back to CRPF, or there is a possibility that you can also extension. There is an extension in NIA also. And now the other question that was there regarding the financial benefits that you asked. All the deputations have their own financial benefits. Like NSG has 25% extra of the basic pay that we have, and the NIA has I think 20% of the extra benefits that you have. And SPG, the Special Protection Group that deals with the Prime Minister security, they have 50% of the basic pay. So that is huge. If I am getting around 70,000 as my basic pay, so my 35,000 will be an extra allowance along with the other allowance of DA and all. So overall, you'll be getting around 1.6 lakhs per month if you go to SPG. So that is huge. And also the thing is, once you go to SPG, you will be dealing with all the top level people. You'll be dealing with Prime Minister, you'll be dealing with ministers, and you'll be dealing with your counterparts in the other countries. Suppose the Prime Minister wants to visit, let's say, for example, US. So he's going to visit Trump, he's having a meeting with Trump. So you'll be there with the Prime Minister all along. I am sure you must have seen Air Force One. There is a movie Air Force One. So you'll be all the similar aspects that deals with that. So you'll be dealing with the Prime Minister's security. You'll go to the US along with the Prime Minister, and then you'll be basically in correlation with the other security agencies of that country. So that gives you an overall experience, a very broad type of experience if you're in SPG. And the same with all the organizations, NSG, SPG, NIA, CBI, all of them have exclusively benefits. And once you get into these, you'll get to know all that, rather than jumping to that. Also, you can search in Google related to what they are. I'm just giving you an overall idea of what it is and the financial benefits that they have and the nature of the job. All of them have the specific task, specific nature of the job. So they all do that, and they have good amount of financial benefits, and they have specific criteria, as I said, certain criteria for all the organizations if you want to get deputed. And IB and RAW also have the same specific criteria. You need to have 3 years of experience. And right now we are recruited in officers as assistant commandant. And once you get into IB, your post will be that of DCIO, that is Deputy Central Intelligence Officer. So the post will be changing. If you get into NIA, it will be Superintendent of Police, SP. If you get into CBI, it will be different. If you get into SPG, you are the team commander. If you get into NSG, you will also be the squad commander. So the name will be varying, but the nature of the job will more or less remain around that. It will evolve around that. So you have to pass all the tests, and you have to fulfill all the criteria once you get into all these parent union that I'm talking about. So there is a lot of opportunity. There is a lot of opportunity for you to explore once you get this basic platform. And there is also one more thing that I want to tell. Earlier, going to other organizations was difficult, but now there is a case that is going on in the Supreme Court. If you're following the news, I'm sure you must all know about something called as OGAS, Organized Group A Services, that the CAPFs are fighting for. It so happens that, unfortunately, the CAPFs are not getting the same benefits that the IAS or IPS counterparts are getting. So now the Supreme Court has said that no, all the CAPFs are in frontline. They're the ones who are doing the most important security duties of the nation. So they'll be getting organized group A services. So once you get the service, the same person who is recruited as an assistant commandant can rise up to the level of a director general. Now it was not possible for us to do that because IPS was coming on deputation. Now it is going to be, now they'll change all the recruitment rules, amendment, and now they'll rise up to the level of DG. So future prospects of the force is very high, very, very high. So that is what I want to basically talk about. I think I've cleared what it is. If there is anything, there is the same question.
Actually, especially our girl aspirants are asking that the kind of stature they have into the armed forces, like in Army, they have recently got the full service commission. In Air Force also, they are very much acknowledged by their services. And as you have shared, the batchmate of yours who has just got recruited in one of the deadliest force, which is called as Cobra. So the stature and the amenities and the kind of facilities are same here for women as it is in armed forces.
So what the thing is, see, armed forces have a completely different setup because they deal with external aggression. So they deal with external aggression, but here we are dealing with certain things that deals with our own men. See, Naxals are our own men. So we cannot be as aggressive as the Army or the Air Force, because Air Force, if that is the case, we could have easily bombarded all this thing using our fighter jets. But here it requires a mixture. See, I'll tell you a simple thing. We are like in between the police and the army. You need to have all the qualities of the army and you need to have all the qualities of the policing. So it is a very tough job. And coming to women in the forces. So earlier it was very, it used to be like a dogma, you can say, in our country, saying that no, women can't get into forces, women are not able to join the forces. But now trend is changing eventually. In one of my as I said, my batchmate has joined Cobra. She's the first female officer to join the Cobra, and she's doing extremely well. She leads men in all the operations. She's the front leader who does all the operations. Of course, there are certain benefits also that women get amongst them, like the extra allowances that you get or something. And with respect to administrative constraints, I must say that you have all your exclusively separate barracks, separate units, and that is always there. But what I'm talking about, when you come to the work field, it is almost the same. Men are on par with women. My batchmate used to run on par with us. Although for women, because of our biological nature, you cannot push as much as you can. Let's say, for example, let's run for 20 kilometers. Because of the biological nature, a woman might not be able to run as fast as a man. But what I'm saying is, right nowadays, women are also competitive enough. They are competing equally with respect to men. There is no that gap that was there earlier is slowly bridging in. And the same thing is being recognized everywhere. The same thing was being recognized, and she also got the Filmfare Award for the best woman. She got I think she's few awards that she's got that deals with internal recognition. So there is a lot of opportunity for women. There is a lot of opportunity for women in the forces, and I feel that India is one of the country where the percentage of women in the forces is very less. So compared to other countries, if you're talking about European countries, if you're talking about Russia, the number of women in the forces are almost equal. At least like they have 40%. But in our country, it is hardly 5 to 10%, I must say. So although the reservation is there for 33%, nobody is writing because of that social background that none of the parents wants to send their girl child to a force to uniformed force. But I feel that it is a good opportunity, and things are changing slowly. The mental ability, the mental this thing was there. What you can say, the stigma that was attached is slowly changing, and you can get into the forces. That is what I feel. It is a good. They have a good opportunity to get into the forces. Equal opportunity, men and women. There is nothing called as no barrier as such.
Sir, the question is from the preparation point of view for this examination. Actually, here also in competitive examinations, we actually cajole our students to read daily newspapers, and we tell them that how important newspapers are for any UPSC or for that sake for any of the examination for government services. So as you have also pointed out that this in UPSC interviews, they are more keen to know your aptitude, your character rather than your knowledge base. So how just it is to read daily newspapers for these examinations, how important they are, and how it helps in building your character, your aptitude, or does it bring any changes in the overall character as such?
Okay, so let me clear one thing for you all, because a lot of people feel that the more we read, the better we become. So I feel that everybody is reading the same, right? Everybody is reading Lakshmikant for political science. Everybody is reading your history, the same books, NCERT history books, geography history books. So what is the difference between those who are clearing and those who are not clearing is that analytical aspect, the thinking, the way you remember things. You study for 1 hour. It is important that you read, or you must remember all the things that you studied for 1 hour. There is no point in studying for 6 hours at a stretch and just your brain letting go of 5 hours. That is not good. So it is better that you study for 2 hours properly, and then you hit the point. And coming to the newspaper aspect, see, newspapers are important. Newspapers are very important because they give you the current affairs. But what I feel is more important is